Welcome to the Boss It Weekly podcast, a no-nonsense, no-hype, frank and close-up analysis of what is currently working and what is not in the world of software. The Boss It podcast is packed with major takeaways for software business owners and managers. So, let's begin.
Welcome to Boss It Podcast, and welcome back to those people that have listened before. Today, we've got a really interesting gentleman who's going to be talking to you today. We've been trying to connect for some time, and I wanted to get him onto the Boss It podcast because I think he will have been through many of the things that all of you at some stage will be facing. Is a real success story there as well, which is a really big positive. Somebody who's been innovating, brought some technology. So I'd like to introduce you to Aurangzeb Khan from, well, I was going to say Altair Systems, but no longer Altair Systems. Welcome to Boss It Podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great to be here and great to finally connect. I know we've been trying to do this for a bit and we're here.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you're actually now part of GN Audio. But I want to let's talk a little bit about Panacast because I'm fascinated by that. As many of the podcast listeners will know, I was originally trained as a photographer. I'm a very keen photographer, so I've had a look at your system, and there was quite a few things there that were of great interest to me. So you're really looking to take video conferencing to the next level. I saw the device that you've got. It's got 3 cameras, so you can do 4K. It's got a 180-degree view, which is very similar to our own Vision, but the difference and the intelligent part of this is that it's looking for people detection in the same way that we do when we're looking at objects or we're in a meeting. Although you can see at 180 degrees, your mind will focus in and it will select. And that's one of the aspects that you're doing is making the video conferencing much closer to what we have when we have a face-to-face meeting, making it, enabling it so that it's a much more satisfying experience. Was that a fair description?
No, that's great. That's perfect. Exactly. And so I think, and actually, a long time back, of course, I enjoyed photography, had my own darkroom, did a lot of work.
Okay.
So a lot of background there, shared background, and then, and if you think about cameras in general, I mean, literally, in the last couple of 100 years that we've had kind of modern cameras, there's been this limitation that, a normal focal length, normal lens camera, which gives you the right perspective, good experience, is around 70 degrees field of view. Mm-hmm. And people have tried to build wide-angle cameras and then the extreme, of course, building fisheye lensed cameras. And, of course, with those cameras, you end up with that fishbowl effect where things look very strange.
You get that distortion.
Distortion, exactly. And so, what we wanted to do, and I looked at all of that and I said, gosh, that's an interesting limitation. And I was contrasting that to how, as you said, when we see the world, we see a lot. We see about 180 degrees, and our brain is naturally focused on edges and objects and then can just, make sense of that whole space. So we look at people, but we see them in context, or we look at a group and we can read the group. We can see who's engaged, who's lost, who's following. And so as I looked at all of that, we said, hey, maybe the right way to do this is actually to build a multi-camera array. Now, when you do that, there's just a whole host of problems that show up because you essentially need to synchronize these cameras perfectly. You need to make sure that their luminance and video quality is identical across all 3 of them. And, the eye is a really precise instrument. So even minute variations in hue and color show up. And so you can imagine if you just slammed 3 cameras together, you would have sort of 3 window panes of video. Yes. And they wouldn't be contiguous, they wouldn't be coherent. So we invented a whole lot of imaging science and computer vision that we implemented in the what we call the Panacast Vision Processor inside our device. And that's what, and I can dig into that more if you like, but that's what allows us to then create this seamless 180-degree field of view where people and objects look correct. You see this curvature because we're painting all the pixels mathematically to a cylinder, but people and objects look scale correct. They're linear across the full 180. And that's completely different than any single camera. Any single camera would give you this large amount of distortion. So solving that was the first big challenge, and that took some work. And then, as you said, what we realized, and actually other folks have also realized, is that cameras with modern artificial intelligence make great AI sensors.
Mm.
And so back in 2017, we were able to not only then, the first few years we were just trying to build a pristine video experience. And then we started to look at, okay, now that I have seen everything and I can see everything and I can see everything with correct geometric fidelity, can I use AI recognition to then discern what are the objects within this field of view? And the first thing we focused on was people detection and counting. We do that anonymously. We don't actually take pictures or know a person recognition-wise who the person is, but we can tell this is a person.
Yes.
And and that turns out to be really powerful. And then we opened up an API to our device so then other companies can start to use this data. And I'll give you some examples, but let me just pause for a moment because, yes, indeed, as you said, the journey we've been on is to essentially reinvent video and photography by giving you this immersive experience. And the core technology is scalable not only to 180, but to 360, to geodesic arrays, to all kinds of new fully inclusive, fully immersive experiences.
Sorry, I
Sorry, go
was
ahead.
just going to say that what really interests me was the applications for this, and that's something that I'd
Right.
like to get into, and perhaps we can talk about some specifics. And I think there's some really good examples there, quite diverse, probably more diverse than people initially thinking. I'd like to start off a little bit. You were born in Pakistan, you lived in
Yep.
Pakistan for a time, but you're currently living in America. How long have
Yeah.
you been in America?
Yeah, a really long time. I actually I'm back and forth all the time. A lot of family in Pakistan. I grew up in Lahore.
Yes.
Did pretty well. I had a first class first in physics and math, and then came to Berkeley where I loved physics, and I ended up at Berkeley doing ECS and nuclear engineering. And semiconductors were just exploding at that time. So this was, gosh, long time back in '76. And then I started working in Silicon Valley, did some of the first big semiconductor chips, and then the big massively parallel computer systems at Tandem. We were building Six Sigma systems to run banks and stock exchanges and things of that kind.
Wow.
And then along the way, ended up doing some degrees at Stanford, and kind of pretty much have always worked here. Love working in Silicon Valley. It's an incredible place. And it's never a dull moment, and so it's just been a long journey, mainly around ultra high performance computing and system on chip devices. And then, I'd been many chances to do my own thing, and then ended up finally, starting my own company, and it worked out really well. And then one led to another, to a third, and so I've been on this journey for
Yeah.
for building new companies.
Well, you've really had an exciting journey. I mean, you were in Silicon Valley at some very exciting times. I'm not saying it's not exciting now,
Right.
but things were moving very, very quickly.
Yes.
Somebody told me that you had 5 degrees. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a slow learner, so
That doesn't sound like a slow learner to me. You studied at Stanford University and you did an entrepreneurial course,
yeah.
which
So what happened is, I started out, I did a master's in electrical engineering, and then kind of the next thing was to, probably do a PhD. A bunch of my friends did the PhDs. But I took a class in the business school about entrepreneurship, and it really had a huge impact on me because Pitt Johnson, who was one of the first VCs in the Valley, he invited over a 10-week period, 10 different entrepreneurs, and he'd give us their business, actually the pitch they made to the VC to raise money, and say, hey, take a look at this. Would you fund these guys? And so we'd kind of do our own analysis and homework, and then he'd invite them in, and these were the big companies of their day. And it humanized the whole notion of entrepreneurship, right? And because
yes,
I was living in that ferment where folks were looking at, and we were breaking, as you said, it's an incredibly exciting place because we're always at that leading edge between the known universe and the unknown universe. And some people, it scares them. They don't like to live there. But if you can live there, and if you can live with that fear and uncertainty, you can actually do some pretty powerful breakthrough things. And I just love that. I just love kind of, that edge of the known technology and the known business models. And so then I ended up doing a master's in engineering management, which is like a one-year technical MBA at
yes,
Stanford. And then continued because I didn't want to change careers. I love technology. I wanted to keep building technology. But I wanted to go build technology companies. And it's turned out to be really powerful because, as I look at opportunities now, I can kind of integrate technical thinking with business thinking,
Yes.
and try and figure out, you know, as you well know in innovation, there's this whole notion of the S curve. And the hardest thing about predicting that transformation is when does it take off? When does it hit that
Yes.
knee of the curve? And there's no kind of necessarily science to that. It's a bit of a gut feel. It's an art and a science kind of rolled together. And that's what I kind of learned, learning by doing. That's another thing I would say I like. I like to learn by doing. And it's just been a phenomenal journey.
Well,
And it's still continuing.
yes, that seems to. I mean, we'll go into the details about Altia Systems, and that's been a tremendous success for you. But your journey continues, and it continues in the same area with the organisation that finally
Yeah.
acquired Altia Systems. But I'm guessing that wouldn't have been your first company, because most entrepreneurs they try many things.
Yeah. No, as you said, this is my third venture, and along the way, a bunch of us from India and Pakistan set up these like the Indus Entrepreneurs, which is now probably the biggest entrepreneurial organization in the world. There's another one called Open, Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs, and then at both Berkeley and actually at Stanford, I'm a member. At Stanford, I'm a mentor in the Technology Ventures program. So what happened is that a lot of us who really we were just kind of finding our way through the forest in the 80s. Figured out that there's a lot of bright folks here. And,
Mm,
these organizations attract people from all over the world.
yes.
And one thing I'll tell you I love about Silicon Valley, like the first 20 people in every company I've done are like from, 10 different countries, right?
Yes.
And that's just incredible. I mean, that's
It is.
really, I think, pretty much only happens in Silicon Valley. And the power of that is that you bring diversity and diverse viewpoints and things of that kind. And to your point, yes, I mean, you try things, they don't work. And so part of being an entrepreneur, of course, you have to be passionate and believe and laser focused. And you do actually, I mean, and I can give you many examples where people literally said, no way, not going to work, not interested, don't do that, do that. And I was like, well, you have to want to think for yourself and
Yes.
say, look, I'm going to place a bet. I may totally screw this up and it may go nowhere, but I think it will, and I'm just going to go for it. And I had many instances where success and failure hung by a thread, and
Mm,
we were able to, hold on, and not let it unravel, and then make it stronger and make the sinew grow, and it expanded. But yeah, both on the technology side as well as on the business side, we've had many instances. And of course, sometimes you do pivot, you pull back. Altia Systems, when we first started, we had the ambition not only to build the device technology, but build the entire cloud transport service. And we did. I mean, one of our guys, his PhD was in stochastic transport. We built the whole thing out. But then we realized that, we just didn't have the amount of money to go do that and the device, right? So we had to
yes.
pick one. And, we picked one, and it was very emotional. I mean, a small team is almost like a family, and when you cut off a certain branch, people get upset. But we looked at it with a cold, objective eye, saying, I've got a certain amount of money, I'm burning it at a certain rate, and I'm just going to run out of money if I try to go down both these roads at the same time.
What were the key things that you learned in those three early ventures? What was the
The,
overriding lesson?
yeah, certainly with the first one, for example, I'll tell you, so what are you capitalizing on, and do you have enough strength in your team? So
Mm,
the first one, well, actually, my co-founders were Japanese. It was a Japanese-American company, and they had an exit earlier, and I had built this team that had a very strong reputation for being among the top teams in the world for ultra high-end chip design. And so, Kenji and so Kenji knew some of the folks at Sony Computer Entertainment, and they attended, the GM from there attended a presentation I made to the grad school folks at Stanford. And, one thing led to another, and they ended up reaching out to us. And I imagine, a 10-person company. And the GM from Sony Computer Entertainment, and eventually it was Kodoragi-san that we worked with, gave us a chance to build a new generation of the PlayStation 2 graphics chip,
yes.
which we did. And then we did multiple steppings of that. And this led to the PS2 really, in the beginning, they had some challenges with production, and essentially this solved those challenges. So then the product completely took off, right? So, there was a little bit of luck, right? Because, we could or not have met those folks. But there was also a lot of preparation, meaning, we'd done something quite unique and it was drawing attention to it. And then we were able to share with the world what we had done, how we had accomplished what we had done. And so I find that's often the case in life, right? It's preparation and luck, and you can't always predict the luck part, but you can certainly do the preparation part.
And I think with many of the people that I've seen that have been successful as of entrepreneurs, I'm always looking for the common denominators between them. And I think one of them is they have to have that passion, enthusiasm, and energy, and they take the ups and the downs and they move forward. And they
Yeah.
keep moving forward. And I think in that way, you're putting yourself there because you're right, there is going to be a degree of luck. But if you're continually putting yourself out there and you keep going, you're going to be lucky more often because
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it's like the
Absolutely.
footballer who, you take more shots on goals, you're going to just score more goals ultimately. And
That's
that's
right.
what it's about. And obviously planning and preparation, but just keep moving forward and learning by those difficult periods that you will go through
Yeah.
because everyone has it.
That's exactly right. There's this famous saying from Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you
You
don't
don't
take.
take. Yes,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and so you
Yes.
just got to take them. And I think, as you said, the other part, and this is not always easy. And I think, part of it is kind of self-awareness, is to say, look, I really think I'm pretty good at what I do. And if somebody rejects me, or if I fail, or if I fall on my face, it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, I've had some success in the past. I'll probably have more failures in the future. And in some sense, if you never failed, then you're not at the edge of your
No,
personal personal envelope,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
I think the other thing that I've seen is the thing that I really admire about entrepreneurs is they have an idea and they bring it to fruition. They take just an idea, they create something of value, and they build that. There's definitely with a lot of these people, there's the desire to create,
yeah.
and I think sometimes I've because we companies come to us quite often when they're looking to sell their business. Sometimes it's because what really motivated them to start a business, as the business gets larger, they end up feeling that they are a manager of people, which is fine. But when it becomes lots of people, too much of their time is taken managing people.
Mm.
Whereas I think with yourselves, and I think this will surprise people, when you sold Altea Systems, is it right? It was 22 people and it was sold for
Yes.
$125 million.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Fantastic.
and I've had, yes, thank you. No, it's been awesome. And I'll tell you, so in fact, what you said is exactly right. And I think, part of my strategy always in every company I've built, I kept it very, very small, deliberately very small, really
Yes.
hand-selected people. And when you bring somebody into the team, it's not like they're perfect. We're all human, right? We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
But you're trying to construct a team, like to your analogy about a football team, right? You're selecting people to build this incredible high-performing team. And yeah, and the teams I mean, things are not always nice and friendly. I mean, we have heated debates and arguments and all that good stuff. But the whole point is, look, we're all together to achieve a mission. And, that's the only thing. I mean, that's what you got to keep your eye on. That's what success looks like, right? So if I can help focus the team on, okay, we're going to go take this hill. We got to go do that. And everything else is secondary. Um, and if people can subscribe and sign on for that mission, that is incredibly powerful. And actually, the other flip side, of keeping it small is you don't need complicated, heavy, involved meetings and all this stuff that sucks up time. All
Mm,
that is needed because when you have a big team, you obviously need some amount of coordination, you need process, you need method, and all that. And those are all good things. Those are all wonderful and necessary things. But in the early days, when you're trying to find your way through the forest, you actually don't know, which path will take you through to the other side.
sure.
And so you need the ability to kind of double back,
Yeah.
reconnoiter in one direction, go in another direction. You just need a level of speed and flexibility and fluidity.
Yes.
And that's really powerfully done with a small team.
Yeah. I think that the speed is so important. We're in such a fast-moving sector. You have to be able to respond quickly. And I think you're right. It's much bigger if you've got a bigger team there.
Right.
And one of the other things that interested me was that I saw your organization, you were predominantly technical people. You didn't have a big sales operation, you didn't have a big marketing operation, but you
Right.
created a business ecosystem around you with resellers and distributors, I believe, that was supporting and selling
That's
your
right.
products. Tell us a bit about that,
That's right.
because that's really going to be of interest to a lot of the people out there that are in the area of software development and solutions.
Yeah, yeah, no, and of course we were selling a system device, and there was a lot of, there was a physical piece of hardware, but then there was a lot of our core IP, which is algorithms and software. Some of it is patented, some of it is trade secret know-how, and some of it we openly shared. And then we had software products like Intelligent Vision and others that we, sold as add-ons to add to our processor. And then once we opened up our API, we had third-party companies writing software and services to add on onto the device. Um, and the other thing, and this is kind of a little bit going back to Geoffrey Moore and crossing the chasm and
Mm.
that whole notion. In the beginning, we felt, and because we took pride in what we had done and really just enjoyed what we were doing, we were out there pitching it to customers and partners at industry events all the time, and we're starting to get, some recognition and getting awards and also getting written up in academic journals. And so what you need, as you well know, is you want to find those early folks who have that resonance, who really want to solve a hard problem and think that you can be a piece of that solution, maybe even the big piece of that solution. And we were very lucky to find some folks early on, who, actually in some cases small companies. Uber, for example, although it's a huge company now, it's very entrepreneurial. A few years back when we started with them, Eric, who started Zoom, had started working with them, and they were using Zoom software. And then I met Shabana and the CIOs there, CIO and the senior folks there, and they looked at Panicast, and it was reasonably raw at the time, but they could see the potential and the power and what we could do. And so we ended up working with them. And the great thing about an early customer who is technically sharp also is they push you very hard. They tell you everything that's wrong with you and your product.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you can fix it,
Yes.
right? So they set the bar really high, but then if you can fix it, really wonderful things happen. And that whole thing culminated where last year they allowed us to publicly share that they had deployed more than 850 Zoom rooms, locations around the world using Zoom and Panicast.
Great.
And, to give you an idea how pervasive video is now, they said last year they were doing 52 million minutes of video a year.
Wow. Yes.
So think about that. And actually now
Yes.
I've met some other customers that are even higher. One of them said they do 30 plus million minutes a month, right? So it's just become a really normal way of doing business.
So there's a lot of data around that, because I know that it's about the video, but it's about audio, but there's also the data element here that you're
Yeah.
collecting, and that's powerful.
Exactly right. See, to me, down the road, and in fact, as you said, so part of it is, we built a product, but we had sort of this idea like, where does it go eventually, right? And even earlier you alluded to that. So let me maybe spend a minute on that. The thing we focused on, and that is still a really hard problem to solve, is how do you do the synchronization, stitching, and optimization, and then the AI sensing in real time, right?
Yes.
So like you and I are, you're in London, I'm in California, and what we're talking, and this is just like you were sitting across the table from me. It's a real-time conversation. For this to work, then the latency, the amount of time it takes for information from my side to go to you and back to me, has to be quite short, on the order of a couple of hundred milliseconds end to end.
Yes.
And so for that purpose, we built this incredibly fast engine, and we were lucky on maybe a little bit of luck, a little bit of smart, where we said, okay, look, there's no way you're going to do that with a generic general purpose processor. So we built our own. Now, then I had to make sure I had the right team to go do that, and we built it in a programmable fabric. And so, I had to kind of build that whole team. But now, having done that, our stitching latency and our pipeline latency is 8 milliseconds, which is like orders of magnitude better than everything else
Yes.
out there. And so that what that means is that this now also is a great platform for things like self-driving cars, smart buildings, Industry 4.0, right? Everything that wants to make sense of the environment, so that the whole notion of edge AI, right, versus cloud delivered AI. So if you need, like, if you're going down a road and you really need to understand what's around you and in front of you, so you can make a timely decision, then you have to have that AI right there at the edge as
Absolutely.
opposed to the photons coming in,
Yes.
right? And so that's kind of the extension to our and then we've got some other high-tech companies that are starting to create what are called big data lakes of information, where they're just gathering information, anonymous information on how people use space, right? How are the collaboration rooms used? How many people typically use them? Is there a seasonality or a pattern during the day, or the week or over a quarter? And then you can go back and try and understand from this data, uh, how facilities are being used. Are they efficient? Could you make them better? Right. There's also automated workflows. So our partners in Australia, AVT, built a workflow where you can do touchless check-in. So let's say, this happens a lot in big companies. You've got thousands of collaboration spaces. On paper, they're all booked. You're trying to find one, can't find one. But if you walk around the building, you'll see, rooms are empty. They're booked, but they're not in use.
Yes.
Somebody booked it and they didn't need it that day. And so now what this does is that they use the people detection and counting feature of the Jabra PanaCast device to say, is there anybody in the room? And,
Yes.
Nobody's in the room. Then they wrote a little service workflow to go to the Google Calendar or the Microsoft Exchange and delete the reservation,
Mm.
right? So then the building becomes sort of self-managing in a way, right?
Yes.
And you can imagine, the extension to that would be to say, hey, turn off the light. So we did some work with Intel Unite earlier, and they're very interested in helping their customers. They now are in 1 million collaboration spaces around the world to reduce their carbon footprint. Say, hey, nobody's there, turn the lights off, turn the TVs off, don't burn energy.
That opens up the market for you in so many different directions. I mean, there are organizations that manage property. There are the likes of sort of WeWork, where they've got offices. They need to have that data to run more efficiently.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I was visiting with some of the customers out in Manhattan, and the whole notion of hot desking is kind of taking off in a big way. And then actually we visited the WeWork folks, and yeah, exactly. Their whole business model is around efficient utilization of space.
What would you say to the people, people who have tried to use video conferencing for business meetings, and so far it's not really worked for them? What would you say about PanaCast, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about the direction that you see this going? Because I know that there was an enormous amount of interest when the idea of video meetings and the first versions came out, but I think that there was a disappointment, there was a frustration. It is being used, it's not being used anywhere near to its full potential. What would you say about PanaCast? How does it overcome those issues?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Well, so two parts of that, right? Firstly, the previous video gear, it kind of tailored to the executive conference room, so that was about 5% of the use case. We deliberately focused on the 95% where, everybody does routine everyday work. And the earlier solutions also were sort of walled gardens. You had to buy everything from one vendor, and it was just a very, very expensive CapEx, OpEx installation, right? So like, $300,000 to equip a room and $10,000 a month for networking bandwidth and all that. So our ambition, right? I mean, any startup wants to say, look, I need to be at least 10 times better than the old stuff. And in our case, actually, it turned out to be, 100 times better because, we're like a $895 device and not a $300,000 device. But what we thought would happen, and it is happening, and the reason we did it the way we did it is to say, look, the world wants open standards, plug-and-play devices so they have control over their destiny. And networks are just getting better all the time, not only in capacity, but also in latency and performance. And we were seeing the emergence of great cloud-enabled services. I mean, the whole internet had taken off by the time we started, back in 2012. There were many companies that had built billion-dollar valuations just from that whole transformation. And so and in fact, it turned out that way. If you look at Zoom's whole value prop exists because it can be delivered through a cloud service. So I'd say take a new look because the devices are much better, like ours. Literally no software. You plug it in, you're good to go. You can start a client like a Skype client, a Microsoft Teams client, a WebEx client, or Zoom, and you and I can have a great audio-video conversation. And the third thing that we really focused on is that with the modern world, real estate was at a premium. We'd been using the Agile methodology for our software development, and we're very used to the Scrum sessions and huddle sessions. And we started to realize that the way people work now, it's just very normal to have distributed teams around the world.
Yes,
And
absolutely. Yes.
it's just an everyday thing, right? Because we're all using these great networks that have come up, and they're just going to keep getting better. 5G is going to make them even lower latency. And so, but then the devices weren't there. The devices were heavy and expensive and hard, or they were really kind of basic webcams where, fine if you're doing a one-on-one, but not really designed for, a group collaboration session. And so that's the gap that we fill. So I'd say, give it a shot. I think you'd find, and we do find often a lot of the companies where the millennial workforce is taking off, they're naturally very comfortable with video and text from personal life.
Yes, absolutely.
And,
YouTube, I think, is enormous for that generation. And
yeah,
they're used to consuming information via video. I mean, I think that they prefer video quite often to reading books, and
right,
and
right.
they absorb information very well that way. So
That's right.
it's becoming more and more. There's also a lot of technology, and we've had a number of companies that have approached us. In fact, recent podcasts. I had a podcast just a few weeks ago with Nigel Cannings, and he's got technology which can convert audio very, very effectively to text.
Hmm.
But it can also work with video in being able to find specific parts of a video, the information that you want without having to manually tag.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
there's another organization, Omdine, Greg Dickerson, who's using video again for software companies who are wanting to be able to allow visitors to their website to find the specific bit of information that they're looking for. They've probably got sort of 1, 2, or 3 questions. Does this software do this? And can I see it? You can actually just search, and again, it will jump to that and show you that piece of information. So there's
Oh,
lots
that's
happening.
awesome.
It's also
Yeah,
being
that's
used in
exactly.
education and in the health sector, so much
Yeah,
more. I can feel that groundswell so much
yeah.
recently. So you're in a good
We
area.
have, yeah, no, no. So we have more than 200 universities around the world, including a lot of the top schools everywhere using us in education. It's huge for education. And then on the other extreme, I'll just give and by the way, all of what you said about how there's audio intelligence, and that was part of the fun we had with the Jabra folks, right? Because it was like they were innovating in audio and they were starting to bring in audio AI, and we'd been doing a lot of work in video and video AI, and you can imagine combining, right? I mean, the whole Alexa and Cortana
Yes.
and Siri thing, right? Kind of imagine combining natural language interaction. There's just a very, very exciting roadmap ahead. You can see that there's, incredible amount of compute available for so cheap, very cheaply, and ubiquitously available over networks, right? Um, that, you can just imagine creating that sort of world around us where technology just fades into the background and kind of does the right thing. And that's very much what we've tried to do with us is get rid of remote controls and all that stuff. Just have the technology try to understand what you're trying to do and do it.
Fantastic. What's what do you hope to be doing in, say, 5 years' time? Do you see that it will be a continuation around video and audio, or is there something else that you're looking at?
5 years, 5 years is
It's
a
a long
long
time.
time.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Lots,
We probably
lots,
should say
lots of
3 years or 2 years.
yeah, a couple of years is easier.
It
Well, I
is.
mean,
You're very right.
we looked at this space and said, look, there's an enormous opportunity now to go build a scale business, right? And as you said very correctly, in the beginning, and that's also kind of a pattern for me is that, I like to build teams where, sort of 90% of the team is deeply technical,
Yes.
right? Because in the beginning, you're trying to solve hard problems. And there are momentum startups, there are family style startups. I've always liked to build venture scale startups. And we think that there are so many smart people around the world, so many great teams around the world. So for us to have a shot at entering that foray, we need to solve a hard problem. And so for that, the engineering team is really crucial, and who it is, not just how many, but who it is. But then the second part, that I loved about the whole conversation we had with Gia and Jabra is they'd built all the other pieces that we just didn't have, right? They'd built a world-class manufacturing capacity, a world-class selling capability, a world-class marketing capability. And so then, when you put them together, it just amplifies. It kind of amplifies immediately. And that's what's been happening. And so my immediate horizon is, we're going to build a global center of excellence for intelligent vision systems here in California. We're going to expand and grow our footprint, very much focused on unified communications first, because that's just that's a $30 billion play right there. But then there are so many of these other markets that we've barely, touched upon, where the technology can become kind of the eyes of the system. Potentially we could become the ears also, but imagine that we become the eyes of all these systems that are going around in the world trying to, interact with the physical world. We can enable them to see and make sense of that. You can imagine for smart cities and smart homes and smart buildings, the same kind of capability. And then just to kind of mention, there's this whole other side, right, that I kind of enjoyed, and we built some products into that space for AR and VR. So a few years back, the Intel True VR team approached us, and we built a device that has 6 cameras. It's an ultra high-end device, 6 cameras, produces 4K 3D video at 60 frames per second over the broadcasting interface, like basically a coax that runs through the truck. And they've been using it. They used it first for the Winter Olympics, and then it's been used later on for the NFL and NBA games. And what it does is, like in the US over the TNT service, you receive this video feed to your smartphone, you put it to your eyes, and you hear and see as if you are present at the kind of the center line of the court. And as you move your head left and right, so on, right? You get a personalized experience, right? Because if you think about broadcasting today, everybody gets the same video feed, more or less, right? If you're watching it on a television, it's the same thing. But here, you're getting that full 180 3D view at very high fidelity delivered to your smartphone. And just like when people express volition by moving their heads and eyes, so then imagine if I look right or left, I'll see whatever I want to see. And you could be getting the same feed and looking at some other part of that 180 field of view.
What a fantastic! It takes watching sport. I mean, I think particularly team sport, because I know that if you're watching any form of team sport like football, for instance, the camera is always following the ball, but quite often, we got the really top players. I know for me, I used to work as a youth football coach, is watching what those really good players do off the ball. But you can't do that on television. To be able to do that, what a great experience. Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So that was, and to what you asked earlier, and it's sort of like some of these, I don't know where they're going to go. Like I don't know if it's going to yield anything, but hey, this is interesting. I want to open this door.
Yes.
I want to walk through this door and, see what's on the other side. And the fun part with that is, people liked it, and it led to a lot of incoming queries, and, we'll see how it goes. So right now that's, not the front burner, it's the back burner, but, there's more, there's sort of more, more irons in the fire, more skillets on the frying pan kind of thing on the fire to bring to fruition.
It's fantastic. It sounds like you're going on a journey of discovery, building upon, the knowledge and experiences that you've built up in the past. And it's in a very exciting area. I think, your timing is perfect. You must have planned that very, very well.
You've a lot of luck.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not. There's a lot of work that's gone into that. And thank you very much for today. Fantastic. It's going to make a very interesting podcast. For people who'd like to find out more about what you're doing now, I believe is it Panacast 3 that you have?
Yeah,
is that the latest version?
We just launched the Jabra Panacast, which is the Panacast 3, but built through kind of an even more scaled production capacity, and it's just a great product. So take a look at Panacast and go to the Jabra website, and you'll see Panacast there. And try it, give it a shot, see how it goes.
Excellent. So go and have a look at panacast.com. Thank you very much for today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed this and you'd like some of your colleagues to please share it. And if you've got any particular topics or people that you would like me to speak to, then please let me know. Thank you very much.